we were now living with a definitely new normal. I mean, I told my secret to Bob that I had an affair, and we found out that I was pregnant as a result of the affair. The baby won't look like the other kids, and the other kids are 10, 12, and 15 years old. And this was really hard for me because I love my kids so much, and I didn't want our whole family to be destroyed because of my mistake. And the fear that was happened was very real. Mm-hmm. But I think our question was, Bob, do we tell the kids everything? Like what actually happened?
Yeah. And you need to do things that are age appropriate.
Yeah.
But, we had taken active steps, to begin to rescue our marriage. We couldn't continue doing what we had always done. No. And so there were some real intentional and deliberate steps to rescue our marriage. I knew that we needed to change. We're living with this new normal. But we're talking about months, of good days and bad days. I mean, maybe a few days together, we're not able to express freely our love towards one another easily at all. And it's almost as though you're an autopilot. You're doing what's necessary.
And I didn't want the kids to feel the pain of and they didn't. Right. If I think back, they were pretty sheltered from it. We were able to mask it somehow during those first few months.
Yeah. And because we wanted our home to remain a safe place for our kids. But, you are now 4 months pregnant and she's beginning to show. And so it's time to tell the kids. And there was a lot of preparation and a lot of seeking in and of myself because I knew that I wasn't the man. I knew that I wasn't the father that I needed to be. I knew my limitations of love and forgiveness. I knew those things. But here we are now, 4 months later, and I knew that the kids needed to know. So one evening after dinner, we invited them up into our bedroom just to have a little family meeting. And when they entered the room, they entered seeing a mom and dad sitting on the bedroom floor crying. And immediately they were gripped with fear. I remember my oldest son, 15 years old, and I'll never forget almost the horror that was on his face and the fear, like what's going on with mom and dad. My daughter, 13 years old as well, she enters in quite confused and nervous. My third born, David, enters the room and we all sit down as a family, and then I immediately stood and I walked over to the bed and I pulled the queen-size blanket from the bed. And with Audrey seated there with our 3 children, I took that blanket and I covered Audrey with that blanket from head to foot. And then I knelt down beside her with her completely covered. And I wrapped my arms around her and I told my kids, this is what God does when we make a mistake. God comes to us in his love and he covers us. And he wraps his arms around us and he says, I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. With Audrey covered and held in my arms, I began to describe to them absolute certainty and security, hope and future. I began to describe to them of how much I loved their mom and that we're a family and that we belong together. With Audrey covered and held in my arms, I then said to my kids, you're going to have a baby brother. Immediately, they knew what had happened. They began to cry. But my little girl, Janelle, 13 years old, she looks at me and she says, Daddy, with the biggest smile on her face, we're having a baby. She recognizes my pain and cries again, but she cannot contain the excitement. She looks at me and says, Daddy, we're having a baby. And I knew we were going to be okay. But my third born, David, he's 10 years old. He's sitting there and he says, I don't get it. Why is everyone crying? At least I'm not going to be the youngest anymore.
I am so grateful. Even when I think back at this moment, I'm so grateful for that you were made that. Even though you didn't feel it, in the moment, it was hard.
Just got to do the right thing sometimes.
You kind of got to just do the right thing. And I just remember feeling this peace of God that was beyond what we could ever understand. And then the plot thickened because I kept getting bigger and it was just a matter of time.